This sounded like a normal situation, but it didn't take long for things to go in a completely different direction. Before getting into this story, there is something worth sitting with. When someone walks out of a person's life, they take a version of that person with them. The version they decided was a final word. And sometimes the most dangerous thing a man can do is let that verdict stand. Marcus Hale did not argue. He did not explain himself. He built, and when she came back years later with lawyers and a legal theory, what she found was not the man she left. It was everything she never stayed long enough to see. If someone out there is building something right now in silence, this story is for them. And if stories like this one hit different, like share and subscribe to the Karma Diaries. New stories drop every week, and tomorrow's, you will want to be there for it. Marcus Hale was 31 years old the first time he understood that his wife saw him as a project she had already decided was not going to work out. They were at dinner, not a special dinner, just a Tuesday, some Italian place near their apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina, the kind of place with a chalkboard menu and candles that drip wax onto the tablecloth. He had been telling her about a 1972 Dino 246 GT he had tracked down through a private seller in Richmond. He explained what the car was, what it meant in automotive history, and what it would be worth restoring right. His eyes are the thing they always did when he talked about cars. A pull, like his whole face came alive around the subject. Renata nodded, not the real kind of nodding, the kind where a person is waiting for you to finish, so the conversation can move somewhere useful. Marcus, she said very gently, when do you think the hobby becomes a job? He heard what she was not saying. The hobby never becomes a job. Stop spending money on old cars and focus on something real. He did not argue. That was one of his problems in that marriage, according to her, and one of his strengths, according to him. He watched her cut her chicken piccata and thought about the Dino and what would feel like to hear that engine run clean for the first time after a proper rebuild. They had been married 3 years at that point. They met at 27 through a mutual friend at a house party in Durham. Renata walked in wearing something red and carrying herself like a woman who had already decided tonight was worth her time. She was sharp in every conversation, deliberate about money, unsentimental in the way people can be when they grew up without the luxury of sentiment. Marcus found all of that attractive. Even now, looking back at everything, she was not a bad person. She had a very specific idea of what a life was supposed to look like, and he stopped fitting that idea somewhere around year 2. She was a regional marketing director for a hospitality brand. Good salary, expense account, business travel a few times a quarter. She liked things that could be explained in one sentence. Her job title, her neighborhood, her husband's career trajectory. Marcus was a mechanical engineer for a commercial HVAC company. Good money, honest work. Completely uninteresting to describe at a dinner party. The car thing was supposed to stay in the garage. Her family had money, not generational wealth, but the kind that accumulates over 2 or 3 careful generations. Her father owned 3 dry cleaning locations in Greensboro. Her mother managed a dental practice. They were not flashy, but they were stable, and stable, to Renata, meant predictable. She liked knowing where things were headed. The problem was that Marcus was not a destination she could locate on any map she recognized. She did not leave because he failed. That matters, because it shapes everything that came after. She left because she could finally see what he was building, and decided it was not going to be fast enough for her. He did not know that the morning she sat across from him at the kitchen table and told him, with her coffee cooling in front of her, that she had been seeing a therapist and had come to realize they wanted different things. She was composed, prepared. She had her points organized in her head the way she always did, point by point, no notes needed. The morning light came through the kitchen window and sat on the table between them like a third person waiting to see what they would do. She said she felt like she was always waiting for him to arrive somewhere she could see clearly, and he could not. He told her he was already somewhere. She said she knew. That was the problem. The papers were filed 6 weeks later. He did not contest the division. She kept the condo in North Raleigh. The joint savings account, about $42,000 at the time, the furniture, the shared car, and a Vitamix blender he had bought her for Christmas and never once used himself. What Marcus kept, A 2008 Tacoma with 200,000 miles on it, a 12 by 20 storage unit he had been renting for 4 years under his own name, and a separate personal savings account holding $114,000. That account had been open since before they met. Money saved steadily, obsessively, in small amounts over a decade, plus a life insurance payout from his father that came through the year before the marriage. He had never hidden it. It simply never came up. Renata had never asked what he owned coming in, only what they had together. Her attorney never looked for premarital assets because the settlement was moving fast, and Marcus was not asking for anything. Nobody thought to look at what he was leaving with. He signed the final papers on a Wednesday morning in November. He drove straight from the attorney's office to the storage unit. He rolled up the door and stood there for a long moment. Inside, the disassembled front suspension of a 1969 Lamborghini Acero, crated engine components sourced over 2 years, a chassis frame wrapped in moving blankets, boxes of parts so specific that most people would not have recognized what they were looking at even if they had known what to look for. He had been building something in silence for 2 years inside that marriage, not because he was hiding it, because it was his, in a way that nothing else was his. And he had learned early that some things you protect by not explaining them until they can explain themselves. He turned on the overhead light. He put in his earbuds. He got to work. This Slero sold 14 months later to a collector in Scottsdale for $380,000. Marcus did not tell anyone. He sat in the parking lot of the storage facility with a wire transfer confirmation on his phone and read the number twice. Then he went back inside and started on the next one. He found the second car through an estate sale referral, a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB that had been sitting under canvas in a retired professor's garage in Chapel Hill for 11 years. The man's daughter did not know what she had. Marcus paid her fair, more than fair. He could have offered less and she would have taken it. But his father used to say that the way you treat people when you have the advantage tells you everything about what you actually are. He paid her 4 times what she expected and slept fine. By month 18, he had a business. Marcus Hale Restorations, LLC, incorporated in North Carolina. A proper facility in Carborough. 6,000 square feet, climate-controlled, with a separate private room. He called the gallery where finished vehicles waited before delivery. He hired one person first. A woman named Celeste who had spent 8 years at a European auto restoration shop in Charlotte and left because the owner got bought out by someone who did not understand the work. She walked into space, ran her hand along the fender of a 1963 Aston Martin DB5 Marcus was mid-restoration on, looked at him, and asked a single question before he could say anything. How long is the wait list? He told her there was not one yet. Give me 6 months, she said. She was right on schedule. By year 2, the wait list was 14 months. By year 3, 22. The reputation spread through collector circles the way real quality always spreads. Not through advertising, but through the specific enthusiasm of someone who has seen something exceptional and cannot quite stop talking about it. A finished 1971 Maserati, Ghibli delivered to a retired cardiologist in Asheville, ended up photographed and featured in a private collector magazine. 2 inquiries came in from Europe before the issue was 3 weeks old. The first international commission was a 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, sourced through a London dealer. It arrived as a running car, but with significant cosmetic and mechanical compromise. Marcus spent 4 months on it. When it left, it was as close to factory original as anything on the planet. The client, a hotel developer from Brussels, sent a handwritten note that still sat in the top left drawer of Marcus's desk years later. The collection was something separate from the business, though the line between them was intentional. Every car Marcus bought for himself, he bought at a milestone. The Dino 246 GT that Renata had interrupted the story of. He finally acquired it in year 2 from the same Richmond seller who had held it under a gentleman's agreement. He paid cash. He drove it back to Carborough with the windows down, and every mile of that drive settled somewhere in his chest where it still stayed. After the Dino came a 1955 Jaguar D-Type, a 1970 Porsche 917K replica chassis. He turned into something beyond replica over 2 years of personal work. a 1962 Ferrari 250 GT, a Bugatti Veyron Grand Sport Vitesse acquired through a private liquidation, kept under a fitted cover in the gallery with no plans to ever sell it, a Pagani Zonda Sync Roadster that arrived by freight from a Milanese estate and left 5 months later looking like it had rolled off the factory floor that morning, a Koenigsegg 1:1, a McLaren F1, the car that changed what the word hypercar could mean, that he spent the better part of a year bringing back to the specification it deserved. Each car marked something, not just a financial milestone, a chapter, a decision that had worked out. A year has passed. The total appraised value of the personal collection at the 4-year mark was $14 million. At the 5-year mark, $31 million. At 7 years, $68 million. None of it was public. Marcus did not cultivate press. He had no social media. The business website was deliberately minimal. Portfolio photographs, a contact form, no prices. The work spoke. The collectors talked. The circle grew. What he did not know for a long time was that Renata had been listening to that circle from the outside. There is something important about this stretch of the story that tends to get rushed past. Marcus was not hiding. He was not scheming. He was building, quietly and completely, the thing he had always been capable of building. And Renata had been close enough to see the beginning of it and decided it was not going to be worth waiting for. That decision has a name. It is not a villain's decision. It is a very human one. People make it every day. They look at what is in front of them and calculate instead of believe. Keep going. This is where it gets complicated. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in March. Marcus was in the gallery, doing a final inspection pass on a Koenigsegg CCX he had sourced through a Swedish dealer and spent 11 months restoring to a specification that did not exist anywhere in the original documentation. They had gone back to the factory's own engineering records. Celeste was at the far end of the room running a paint thickness check on a McLaren F1 they had recently acquired. The kind of afternoon that was just about work. Quiet. The good kind. His phone rang with a number he recognized attached to a name he had not seen in 6 years. Renata Hale. She had kept his last name. He had not thought about that in some time. He let it ring through. He finished the inspection pass. He wrote his notes on the clipboard. Then he walked to his office, sat down, and called the number back. She picked up on the second ring. Marcus. Her voice was the same. Composed, direct, that particular register landing exactly between warm and professional. I wasn't sure you called back. I wasn't sure either, he said. That was honest. There was a short silence. She said she had something she needed to discuss and asked if they could meet in person. He told her she could bring whatever she needed to say to the facility. He was there most days. She said she would prefer somewhere neutral. He told her the facility was neutral. It was his office. She came 3 days later, on a Monday, and she did not come alone. The man with her introduced himself as Raymond Osei, attorney at law. He was in his early 50s, built lean, with the kind of careful stillness that develops over years of sitting in rooms where the wrong word costs somebody something. He carried a soft leather briefcase and a portfolio clearly organized over multiple sittings. Renata looked, if truth be told, more rested than she had looked at the end of the marriage. She had cut her hair shorter. She was dressed to be taken seriously, which was always how she dressed when she intended to win something. They stood in the reception area. She looked around, at the original architectural drawings mounted on the wall, at the framed commission letters, at the small bronze sculpture on the credenza that a client had sent after delivery, and she did the thing Marcus remembered. She calculated, quietly, precisely, without moving her face. Raymond opened the portfolio. The theory, as he presented it over the next 20 minutes, went like this. Certain intellectual properties and professional relationships forming the foundation of Marcus Hale restorations had been developed during the marriage. The contacts Marcus cultivated, the technical knowledge he built, the reputation he established. Under North Carolina law, Raymond argued there was a good faith basis to file a motion for a post-decree equitable adjustment. The marital estate, he said, had contributed to the conditions that made the success possible. He used the phrase conditions that made success possible 4 times. Marcus counted. He let Raymond finish without a single interruption. which Marcus could feel made Renata uneasy. She remembered that about him. When he went quiet, it was not absent, it was attention. "I'd like to respond to this with counsel," Marcus said when Raymond was done. "I'll be in touch by Friday." Raymond nodded. Professional. Clean. Renata looked at Marcus once more before turning to go. Just for a second, something moved through her expression that was difficult to name. Not guilt exactly. Something older and less comfortable than guilt. Marcus held the door for them on the way out. His attorney was a woman named Phyllis Boateng, a corporate and family law specialist out of Durham. She had the particular quality of never reacting to anything until she had read it completely, and the particular quality of never letting you know how serious something was until she had decided what to do about it. She read Raymond's preliminary filing over a weekend and called Monday morning. "The theory is possible," she said. "Not probable, but it is possible. The window on this kind of motion is almost closed, which is exactly why they're moving now." She paused. "Tell me about the premarital account." Marcus told her. The account opened at 23, contributed steadily over 8 years before the marriage. His father's life insurance deposit, never combined with any joint fund, never named in the marital estate documentation because her attorney had never asked and he had not volunteered what was not being asked about. Phyllis was quiet for several seconds. "Do you have the full paper trail?" "Everything. Account opening date, contribution history, the inheritance wire, tax records for every year existed." Another silence, different from the first one, the sound of a lawyer recalibrating. "Marcus," Phyllis said carefully, "that account funds the purchase of the first vehicle, which funds a business." "Yes." "Which means their foundational argument, that the business grew from marital resources, doesn't exist." "That's my read." She said she would need everything by the end of the week and to touch nothing in the business records until she had reviewed them. He told her the documents would be there by Wednesday. But the account was not the only thing Marcus had. 3 weeks before Renata's attorney walked through the facility door, Marcus had received a call from a man named Gerald Whitmore, a longtime collector. One of the first to commission a full restoration back when the business was 2 years old and still finding its shape. Gerald called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual. He was a morning caller, and his voice carried the specific quality of someone who has been sitting on something for a while and finally decided to put down. He told Marcus that about 8 months earlier, a woman had called his office identifying herself as Marcus's business development partner. She asked specific questions. What the annual revenue looked like, how Gerald understood the value of the personal collection, whether Marcus had taken on any outside investment. She was smooth, Gerald said. Easy to talk to. He had assumed Marcus sent her. He had not thought about it again until he read a small profile of Marcus in a regional business journal, in which Marcus made a point of noting that the company had no outside partners. Gerald said the math did not add up, and he wanted Marcus to know. "What did she sound like?" Marcus asked. Gerald described her voice. Precise, pleasant, practiced. Marcus already knew who it was before he heard the name. He asked Gerald if he was willing to put that in writing. Gerald said he had already assumed Marcus would ask, and yes, he was prepared to. 2 days after that call, a second person reached out, a dealer in Charlotte named Priya Subramaniam, someone Marcus had a long professional relationship with, called to say she had received a similar call approximately 10 months back. Same woman, same persona, same questions. Priya had been more guarded. She had not given specifics, only confirmed that business seemed to be going well. She had thought it was unusual, but had no context to attach it to. 10 months. The call started 10 months before Raymond walked into the reception area. Renata had not decided to file a motion after stumbling across a magazine article. She had been building toward it for nearly a year, collecting financial intelligence through Marcus's own professional circle, assembling a picture she could take to an attorney. She had been watching the numbers grow from the outside and waiting until they were large enough to be worth pursuing. Marcus sat with that information for a long time, not with anger, with a kind of clarity that only comes when a person stops expecting something different from someone and finally just sees them plainly for what they are. He called Phyllis back that evening and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. "How quickly can you get me Gerald Whitmore's written statement?" she asked when he finished. "He can have it notarized by Thursday." "Get it Friday," she said. "We're not rushing this. We're building it right. There's one more thing that needs telling before the meeting in that conference room." In year 5 of the business, Marcus built a car, not restored, built from the ground up over 22 months in a private bay at the back of a facility that nobody entered without an invitation. A custom hypercar, commission-free, not for sale, built entirely to a specification. He rode himself on a legal pad over a long weekend when the facility was quiet and cold in his. The chassis came from a motorsport fabricator in Turin. The engine was a modified twin-turbocharged V8 sourced from a racing team that had moved to a newer platform. The body was shaped by a retired Pininfarina designer named Aldo, found through A, contacted Maranello, and flown to Carborough for 2 weeks to work with the team on the forms. The paint was a color Marcus mixed himself over 3 sessions, deep midnight blue with a very slight iridescence visible only in certain light, like a secret the car kept until a person stood at exactly the right angle. He named it First Principle. The name came from his father, who had a way of approaching any problem: a broken transmission, a struggling relationship, a bad financial decision, by going back to the most basic honest question he could ask about it. Not what went wrong, but what is actually true. Strip everything down. Start from what you know. Build from there. Marcus had started from one honest truth in that storage unit the morning after the divorce papers were signed. He knew how to do this work, and he was going to do it until it was done. Everything else, the business, the collection, the $68 million in appraised value by that point, came from that single decision, hence the name. First Principle was unveiled at a private collector event in Monterey. There was no advance announcement. The car simply arrived, sitting under a cloth, and when the cloth came off, the room went quiet in particular way rooms go quiet when people do not yet have language for what they are looking at. A journalist from a European automotive magazine was present. He published a piece 3 weeks later. The headline called First Principle the most significant privately built vehicle in North America in a generation. An appraiser quoted in the piece put First Principle's value alone at somewhere between $9 and $12 million. The total collection at that point was over $100 million. That article is almost certainly how Renata's attorney found the number. The meeting was held in Phyllis's conference room on a Thursday morning in early April. Her office sat on the 10th floor of a building in downtown Durham, with windows that looked south over the city. The conference room had a long, dark table, 6 chairs, and nothing on the walls except a single frame print of a Durham street scene from 1962. Marcus had spent 3 separate meetings deciding whether he liked it. He had landed on yes. Renata arrived with Raymond and a second attorney, a junior associate, brought to carry documents and observe. She sat down without looking around the room. She looked directly at Marcus. He noticed that she had stopped performing composure. She was simply composed, which is a different thing entirely. Raymond opened his portfolio and began. He had refined the argument. The version he presented that morning was tighter than the one delivered at the facility. He had anticipated pushback on the commingling question and added language about the value of professional relationships developed within the marital period, arguing that a contact is as much an asset as a dollar. It was not a stupid argument. Credit where it was due. Phyllis let him finish. Then she opened her own file and placed the first document in front of him, the account statement. Every line, dating back to when Marcus was 23 years old. Contribution history. Tax records. The inheritance deposit his father's estate had wired in the year before the marriage. At the bottom of the stack, the purchase record for the Acelero chassis components. The first real investment, paid from that account. Not 1 cent of shared money. Raymond read it. He was thorough. He took his time. He put it down. Phyllis placed the second document on top of the first without speaking. Gerald Whitmore's statement, signed and notarized. 4 paragraphs, clear and precise. The date of the call, the questions asked, the persona used, the name given. Priya Subramaniam's statement came next. Same format, different date, different details. Same conclusion. Raymond read both and set them side by side. He was looking for inconsistency. There was none. Phyllis then placed the business and corporation documents on the table. the entity created after the divorce was finalized. The facility lease dated 7 weeks post-settlement. The first client contract was signed 14 months after papers were signed. The financial summary came last. 47 pages, prepared by a forensic CPA whose credentials were listed on the cover page. Every transaction from the first dollar forward. No marital funds. No shared resources. No overlap of any kind. The room was very quiet. Raymond spoke to Renata in a low voice. She listened, her eyes on the table. He spoke again. She gave a small nod that looked like it cost something. My client would like to discuss a potential, Raymond began. There's nothing to discuss, Phyllis said. Not unkind, just accurate. Raymond closed his portfolio. Renata looked at Marcus across the table. She looked at him the way people look at something when they're trying to memorize it and do not want to admit that is what they are doing. Phyllis began the paperwork for the withdrawal. Marcus watched it happen and felt very little, except a kind of tiredness that was not unpleasant, the tiredness of something being finished. Renata caught up to him at the elevator. Marcus had said his goodbyes to Phyllis, gathered his documents, and was heading down to street level when he heard footsteps behind him. Marcus. He stopped, turned around. She was alone. Raymond was still in the conference room. She had followed Marcus out without the armor of the legal structure around her, and what that left was a woman who looked, for the first time he could remember, like she was not sure what came next. They stood in the hallway outside the elevator, with the building humming around them. You could have made this ugly, she said. In the meeting, you had enough to make it very ugly. I know. Why didn't you? He thought about it for a moment. It wouldn't have changed anything worth changing. She nodded slowly. She looked at the floor, then back at him. The car, she said. The one you named. First principle. She said the name carefully, like she was trying to understand the shape of it. When did you build that? Year 5. She was quiet for a moment. I read the article. He waited. I read the whole article. She said again, softer. He understood what she was trying to say without saying it, that she had recognized herself somewhere in the reading, in the space between the man she had left and the man the article described. He looked at her for a moment. Then he asked the only question he had actually wanted to ask for 6 years. Did you ever believe I was going to build something? Not hope. No wonder. Did you actually believe it? She did not answer right away. The elevator arrived and opened, and neither of them moved. She opened her mouth and then closed it. She looked at him with something that was not quite an answer, but was, in its own way, completely an answer, the kind that tells you everything precisely, because it cannot find words. Marcus had his. He nodded once, not angry, not relieved, settled, the way a person feels when a question carried for years finally gets answered, even when the answer comes as silence. Take care of yourself, Renata, he said. He stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. 14 months after that Thursday morning in Durham, Marcus Hale Restorations was commissioned by a private foundation to restore and house a collection of 12 historically significant vehicles for a traveling automotive museum that would visit 6 countries over 3 years. It was the largest single commission in the company's history. The personal collection grew to 44 vehicles. The appraised value passed $110 million. Celeste became a full equity partner. She read every page of the agreement before signing, which Marcus expected, and then she put the pen down and said she wanted the South Bay for a new intake project. He told her it was already hers. Marcus launched an apprenticeship program the following spring for young men from the working-class neighborhoods of Durham and East Raleigh, young men who reminded him of himself in the storage unit at 31. Holding something they believed in before the world had confirmed they were right to. The program funded 2 years of full training, a stipend, and a guaranteed position review at completion. He named it after his father. Word reached Marcus through a mutual contact that Renata had taken a position with a hospitality group based in Atlanta, and that she seemed, by all accounts, to be doing well. He was glad to hear it. He meant that plainly, without complication. First principle remained in the private gallery at the far end of the facility. Marcus did not take it to events. He did not loan it to exhibitions. He drove it sometimes, On long weekend mornings when the roads were quiet, windows down, no destination, just the engine doing what a well-built engine does when it's been given room to breathe. On one of those mornings, coming back into Carborough just as the light went gold on the buildings, he thought about Renata asking him the name of the car. First principle. He thought about the way she had said it. Carefully, like she was picking the words up and weighing them. She had understood what it meant. Maybe for the first time. Maybe too late. Maybe exactly when she was supposed to. The car hummed underneath him. The road was empty. The morning was new. That was enough. What lingers about this story, and it will linger, is that Marcus never needed her to understand. He just needed to keep going. The person who doubts someone is not responsible for that person's results. They are responsible for themselves. Marcus knew that, and everything he built came from one decision. Stop explaining yourself and start proving yourself to the only person it ever really mattered to. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it. You never know who in your circle needs to hear something like this today. Subscribe to the Karma Diaries because new stories drop every single week. And the next one is not something to miss. The Karma Diaries never lies. The end.